guest with us tonight is Samantha Walravens, who wrote this incredible book. I want to tell you a little bit about Samantha. I met Samantha through our VP of Operations, Julie Carlucci, and she called me and was like, I've got the perfect person for our next talk. She's incredible. She wrote this wonderful book, and she's talking about a really pertinent topic for all of us, and that's women in tech. So Samantha is an award-winning journalist, and she's the author of 2 books. One is the New York Times acclaimed anthology called Torn, True Stories of Kids, Career, and the Conflict of Modern Motherhood. And then more recently, she wrote Geek Girl Rising, Inside the Sisterhood, Shaking Up Tech. So a little bit more about Samantha. She's a contributor to Forbes, The Huffington Post, and Disney Online. She speaks nationwide on the topics of women, career, and work-life success. She's presented at South by Southwest in Austin, the Watermark Conference in Silicon Valley, and at companies like Google and Goldman Sachs. And then she just returned a couple days ago, right? From lecturing at her alma mater in Princeton. So we're so excited to have her. Her latest book, again, that we're going to be talking about tonight, Geek Girl Rising, uncovers the stories of female founders and innovators in tech. And what I really loved about Sam's book is the storytelling. So I feel like as women, when we come together and when we are holding each other up both in challenges and triumphs, I think one of the greatest tools that we can use is the resonance of our own experience. And so what I thought was amazing about this book is she brings so many women's experiences into the fold, both the good times and the hard times, the pioneering times, the trailblazing times, and the times where they felt really hampered by very apparent and obvious sexism. And I just felt like in each of those stories and in each of the role models that she brings up in the book, we find a little piece of ourselves. And I think that if there's one way as women that we can really connect deeply, it's to know that we're not in this alone. So I really applaud you for bringing those stories to us.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
And please, if anyone has any questions, feel free. Is it okay?
Absolutely.
People ask questions and, just shout out, because I love conversation.
So Sam and I were talking earlier that we like it casual. We want it to feel warm and intimate. So yes, please chime in if you have a burning question or a comment or an experience. We'd love to hear it, right?
Definitely.
So let's start with. I know this is your second book, as I mentioned. So what was the inspiration for Geek Girl Rising? Can you tell us a little bit about how it started?
So the inspiration for this book, so I call myself a first-generation Valley girl. So I worked in Silicon Valley, and I'm dating myself, and my husband always says, do not say when you worked in Silicon Valley, because it makes you sound really old. But I did. I worked in Silicon Valley in the 1990s. My first job was as a technology reporter for PC World magazine in the mid-90s, covering the rise of the dot-com. So I was covering Netscape and eBay and PayPal and Microsoft Windows 95 and all that fun stuff. And I kind of got the internet bug, and I was writing and reporting about all these great startups in the dot-com world. And I'm like, hey, I want a piece of the action. Right. So I went to work for a software company called Tumbleweed Software, which made secure messaging software, and basically rode the dot-com wave up and down. So we went public in 1999. Everyone was feeling really rich, and then the dot-com bubble burst, and the stock went, just basically tanked, went to like 2. And the company was actually eventually bought by a European company in 2006, I believe. But during that time, I made a lot of close friends, a lot of women who mentored me, who I stayed in touch with. So fast forward a number of years, I was having lunch with one of my mentors, actually, who's a VP of sales at a tech company. And she was saying, Sam, since you've been out of Silicon Valley, she said that it's gotten really bad. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I had my performance review. She's the VP of sales at a software company. She said, I had my performance review recently, and my manager said to me, even though my sales team had hit our numbers out of the ballpark, just crushed it, she said, he told me that, he congratulated me on making my numbers, and he said, but there's been some chatter, some feedback in the office about, she's a very statuesque, tall, blonde woman, that your dresses are too bright, and you wear too many bracelets, and your lipstick is too colorful. Can you tone it down a little bit? And I mean, she almost thought it was a joke. And then he went on to say, and then also people have mentioned that you're a bit, assertive, bossy. Can you just need to tone everything down a little bit. And she was in tears when she was telling me the story. And she said, Sam, will you write, and this is 2013, will you write, because I was writing for the Huffington Post at the time, will you write about my experience? And she had left the company. She left a couple weeks after that. She said, I want you to write about this. And I said, well, I'm not going to write about it until I do some research and dig in and see what's going on with other women. So I started interviewing women, and I heard over and over again, and there was a survey 2 years ago, the Elephant in the Valley survey, that showed, and this is what I heard, that the majority, over 60% of women in Silicon Valley have been sexually harassed, have received unwanted sexual advances, and have just been through this kind of, and also received the unconscious bias, this kind of bias, like telling us that we're too aggressive, too assertive, what we're wearing is not right, that kind of stuff. That's it's like death by 1,000 cuts. Like after a certain amount of time, a certain amount of comments, so you get it starts to really hurt. So I talked to these women, but the interesting thing about the conversations I was having was that they said to me, Sam, we've all been through this. A lot of women have experienced this kind of bias and harassment. But can I tell you about this company that I'm starting? And can I tell you about this venture fund that I'm starting, or this technology that I'm building? So they wanted to tell me about their stories about what they were creating, what they were building, more so than talking about not just the sexual harassment, because that's a big deal, but they wanted to tell their stories. So I started collecting their stories. And then as I was approaching more women, Heather Cabot, my co-author, emailed me and said, Sam, I'm working on a very similar topic about women in Silicon Alley. She's in New York. And the companies that are coming out of Silicon Alley, let's partner up together and write this book. And let's make it a positive spin. Let's look at the success stories, and let's look at what these women have been through, but also let's focus on how they've overcome challenges and obstacles to create, to build, to network, and to make the world a better place through their businesses.
I love that. I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but I think one of the things that resonated with me really deeply when I was reading this is just that these are real life stories. Like I love, and I love, there's you'll see it in the book, but there's data, there's real life stories, there's case studies, and it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But what prompted you to structure it in that way, where it's really told through the voices of all these stories of women and their wisdom and experience?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great question. Well, so we read all the numbers, and frankly, I get really bored with numbers. I'm more of a word person. But we really wanted to replace the stereotypes, the numbers, with stories, and put the human element back into it. Mm-hmm. And we also, Heather, my co-author, and I both have daughters. So I have two young girls who are 9 and 13, and she's got an 11-year-old. And we wanted to show them role models of women who are succeeding, who have overcome challenges, and who are succeeding in tech. And to do that, we wanted to get to know the women. So we've actually received some criticism about, describing the women in detail, and what they wore, and they wore high heels, and they wore like black leather pants. And people said, well, why do you care? You're just that's not feminist to say. But we wanted to make them real to our readers and show that these are women who look like every different color. They wear every different kind of clothing. They're all women. And that it's possible to do this, regardless of what you look like or what color you are.
And tell us, so I'm just going to tell some stories about some of the stories that you tell in the book, for those of you that haven't read the book. Because I would like to add some color to the human experience of some of these women. Because there were parts of the book that I was reading, realizing, I did marketing in the tech industry, so I know the tech world, but there's so much of this and there's stories that I feel like applies to all of us, regardless of what we're doing, and there's wisdom and learnings and heartbreak and discrimination and things that we've all experienced, whether we were in tech or not. Yeah. So do you want to tell us just a couple of stories? Yeah. Think of any examples of women?
I'd love to. Yeah. Well, one of the stories, actually, I was telling someone before we started talking, is a story of failure. And one thing that we discovered after interviewing over 300 women was that and girls was that this fear of failure often holds women back. Like, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not techie enough to start a tech company. Meanwhile, many of these tech founders are not coders. They don't have computer science backgrounds, but we'll get to that. But there's a story about a woman, her name is Donna Sarkar, and she is a lead engineer at Microsoft. And the story, you have to read it, because the way she tells it, the way she relayed it to us is just so, she's funny, she's great. But she said she grew up in Detroit. She's from a family from Kathmandu. Her parents didn't speak English well. She went to a public high school, and then she went off to the University of Michigan, and she wanted to try, she and her dad would read the Wall Street Journal together, and he said, Donna, I think that this technology thing is gonna be big. I think Silicon Valley is gonna be really big, and you should get into it. So she goes to Michigan, she takes her first computer science class, and there she is in this room of, big lecture, mostly men, boys in the class, and she was afraid to raise her hand and ask questions, because she said the guys in the class, first of all, they were like, oh, we already know this, let's move on to the next thing, we've already covered this. And then she realized most of these boys had taken computer science, if not AP computer science in high school. She had never had any computer science, so she was doing this for the first time. And not only did she fear fear of failure, she actually failed the class, so she got an F in the class. And she was contemplating dropping out of computer science altogether, but she enjoyed it and she just wanted to continue. She said, she had to tell herself that failure, these boys had done computer science before, and she said it was like riding a bike. When you get on a bike the first time, usually you fall off, and often you'll fall off twice or 3 times. And what did you quit? You say, forget it, I'm done. I'm not going to learn how to ride a bike. And you get back on and you try it again. So she got back in the saddle. She took the class over again. She got a B. And she ended up graduating with a computer science degree from Michigan. And she said her GPA wasn't that great, but she got a job at Microsoft. Now she's heading up the HoloLens program at Microsoft, which is their augmented reality program. And she's loving what she does. So, the message there is, go for it. And if you fail, it's okay. We hear about failing forward. And sometimes you think, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that you can actually fail and you can try it again. And it's not the end of the world. You can try it again and succeed. So don't give up after your first failure. That's one of my favorite stories, because I have this desperate fear of failure, of, oh my God, I can't do that. And if you step out, and a lot of the women in the book have stepped out of their comfort zone and done something that they didn't think they could do, and they've made it happen.
Right, against a lot of obstacles.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You use one of the words in the book, inside the sisterhood, shaking up tech. And I'm really interested in the word sisterhood. One of the things that we talk about here, and I don't use the specific word sisterhood to mean one of the magic that happens here is this intuitive, instinctual yearning to help other women. And I think it's interesting. I certainly see it on a daily basis here. It ties back to what we were talking about earlier in the evening, that when things happen, whether it's community crisis or individual crisis, I feel like leave it to a woman to stand up and be like, I'll be there. I'll be there with food, I'll be there with love, I'll be there with whatever you need. And I saw that in the book as well, in some very trying circumstances where women leaders in technology had done more than enough to rise into these leadership positions, and sometimes unfairly didn't get them. And so I thought it was a really beautiful theme of the book that you talked about other women stepping in to support, help, mentor, lift up, and work toward equality together. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Sure,
about
yeah.
women among other women in tech organizations?
Yeah. Well, from the very beginning of my career, my mission in life is to have women help other women, and for me to help other women. So that's sort of my underlying foundation for everything I do, in everything I've done in my life. But the sisterhood theme came up, it kind of bubbled up as we interviewed women. It was a surprise. We didn't realize that, we were asking, like, what is your secret to success? And many of them said, we know we have we've had great mentors, we've overcome failure, we don't give
Right.
up, we're persistent. But the one thing that we didn't expect was that these women had found their posse or their tribe, that they weren't doing it alone. And entrepreneurship especially can be a very lonely business.
Right.
Right? If you're starting a company on your own, you really have to find those people who are not just your cheerleading squad, but the people who are going to advise you, who are going to guide you, who are going to be there for you when things aren't going well. And that's something that we found in common with many of the entrepreneurs that we interviewed, as well as many of the women at tech companies. So one of my favorite stories, and the other thing we were looking at was this, like the boys club. There's this notion of the boys club, and it goes back decades and centuries, and the boys have always been at the top, and they support each other. And we're like, you know what? Where's the girls' club? And we started seeing that there are these, like, look at here. There are these girls' clubs, right, where women are supporting other women. So one of my favorite stories about this is Shanna Tellerman, who is the CEO of a company called Modsy, which is, if you haven't seen it, it's a great company. Check it out. It's a 3D interior design company. So you can go, and she uses this imaging technology to allow you to walk through your room, and you actually take pictures of your room, like your living room, and you create this space online, and then she'll decorate it based on your style, so modern, contemporary, traditional, and then you can walk through, like as an avatar, and you can buy the accessories, the furniture, right. And she's done partnerships with all these different companies. It's a very cool very cool company. But anyway, she was starting this business. Actually, before she started the business, she was at Google Ventures. She's a rock star. She started her first company right out of Carnegie Mellon, which was a 3D gaming platform. Sold that to Autodesk when she was 23. And she went to work for Google Ventures. I know, she's incredible. And the nicest person you'll ever meet, really. She sold that to Google. She went to work for Google Ventures as a VC, and that's when she said she realized that all of these entrepreneurs coming to pitch her were all men, and she didn't realize that it was like this, that there were so few women entrepreneurs. And she started this monthly happy hour. And she said, okay, fellow female entrepreneurs, investors, friends from college, let's all get together on a monthly basis, go out for a glass of wine or cocktail, and just get to know each other on a personal level outside of work. Well, this then, after months and months, translated into, she said, let's take the show on the road, and let's go to Park City, Utah, and do a ski trip. So every year in Park City, there's this Thin Air Innovation Festival, which is a global entrepreneurship startup festival. Takes place in the springtime, Park City, so it's this boondoggle week.
Right.
And so she and a bunch of entrepreneurs she brought into her girls' club went, and they started it's called the Pinnacle Project. So they go every year now, and they go, and she said it was funny because it was a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and some of the other women said, this is like, we have kids, we're running companies, what are we doing on the slopes of Park City in the middle of the week? We should not be doing this. And Shanna said, you know what, the guys do this. The guys go off and they play golf, and they go on ski trips, and it's all part of work. And the important lesson that I pull from that is that networking, and I don't like networking. I get really like walking into a big professional networking event, I get like, I get like butterflies in my stomach. I just don't like walking into big crowds. But she said, networking is about building relationships with people. It's like getting to know people personally. It's not about going to an event and sitting there and watching a keynote speaker and going around shaking your hand and throwing out a business card. It's about getting to know people. So it's really important to spend time outside the office, getting to know people, not talking about work, and getting to know what they're about and who they are as a person. So, and she says that this is an example of a girls' club, creating a sisterhood because she didn't have it. She couldn't find a sisterhood, so she created her own.
Right. Let's talk. I love this idea of sisterhood. Of course, I love the idea of women elevating women. I think that's what we're about here. But I do want to address just the challenges too. I know many of us have had really difficult times in tech. I have a story similar to the one that you told earlier that I've told here before when I went to get my annual review, and I had made my number, and I had hired the people that I was going to hire, and I had done exactly, when we're going down the list of my performance review, I had done or exceeded everything on the list, and then I didn't get my full review, or my full bonus. And when I asked why, my boss told me it was because there was feedback that I was too effusive with clients. I was too excited about. I was frankly just too excited to help them, and that my personality wasn't honoring their brand. And it actually was one of the biggest gifts I've ever been given, because I remember like nodding, like it was one of those where like the kind of room gets really quiet and I'm nodding and smiling and going like, I'm gonna get out of here. This is done. Like, and the idea of the Hivery that had felt like it was this burning desire of mine felt all of a sudden very clear. Like, okay, this guy's telling me that I'm not gonna get my full bonus if I'm indeed myself. So I think it's time for me to hit the road. But, so I think we all have a story like that, right? I mean, we all have a story where in order to advance, we were either encouraged not to be ourselves or told we couldn't advance by being ourselves. I know Janet has stories of, I love, one story that Janet told me one time was that someone had asked her, like, tell me, like, where do you see a hint of gender bias? And she was like right over there. The T-shirts are extra large, men's, all of them.
And T-shirt for each year that this well-known company now, social media company, had been in business, that were hanging prominently across the office, and it was like each year there was a large men's T-shirt. Like, we're like, well, there's nothing that's gendered in this space.
Right.
Hello.
Right there.
Yeah, I know. Open your eyes. Yeah.
So will you talk a little bit about that? Just about, I mean, the challenges that are very prevalent and sometimes feel like you were saying earlier, sometimes it feels like it's not getting better.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've all read the news out of Silicon Valley, and it seems like it keeps coming, and it's coming from the White House, it's coming from Silicon Valley, and it's a problem. The good thing about, I don't know if I want to go over all the details of like, Susan Fowler wrote the blog post about her manager at Uber who was sending her texts and emails with inappropriate comments and propositioning her. And she went to her human resources department, and they said, well, this guy is a great, he's a performer, he's a producer, we're not getting rid of him. You can move teams, but you got to deal with it. And this had happened to multiple people over a long period of time. And it was being swept under the rug, and finally, after it was exposed with this blog post, which is sort of the beautiful thing about technology and data, we were talking earlier, that there's so much data that it's overwhelming, but there is a sense that you can talk about these things. They don't have to sweep them under the rug anymore. Before, it used to be like taboo to talk about sexual harassment, sexism, anything you've experienced, because, well, it was, first of all, it's shameful as a woman to have to admit that, and also you would be told that, well, nothing's going to happen here. You can leave. You have an option to leave if you want. And there were no repercussions. There were no repercussions, and there was no accountability, and there was no responsibility taken by the companies. So I think that we're going through a sea change now in Silicon Valley with the women feeling empowered to speak up against sexism, being willing to state the names of the perpetrators, and it's leading to like a cleaning out of this kind of behavior, which for so long has been covered up, and just Harvey Weinstein, Hollywood. Yeah. It's not like it's only Silicon Valley, right? It's many industries. Silicon Valley is getting the attention, but it's many different industries, and I think we're going through a really positive change now. So I'm excited. I'm happy about it. I feel like for too long it's been just covered up.
I agree. Marty,
I was saying that I feel really heartened by the stories of these women who have tried so hard to fit in and to do everything to succeed in the boys' club, in the man's world, and have finally said, forget it. Let's just start our own, something that works. Can you tell a little bit about some of those stories, the parallel universe that women are creating?
Yeah. One of my favorite lines in the book is from Shelley Zallis, who started a lounge called the Girls Lounge at technology companies, which are very male dominated for the most part. And it's this, sort of a safe space. It's very beautiful. If you've ever, what's coming up? Dreamforce is coming up. So she'll be at Dreamforce. And if you can just pop by, she's got wonderful panels of speakers. And she also has spa services. So you can get like mani-pedis, you can get massages. It's like a brilliant idea. But Shelley said that a woman who acts like a man is a waste of a woman. And I think that's a really important quote because it just reinforces that idea that, we have to be authentic. We have to be who we are. We don't have to be, remember the days where, like back in the 80s, where like you'd have to wear the little bow tie and like a suit with padded shoulders to try to look like a man, look strong. Maybe in some industries, but not so much. I've been on panels with women in finance and in the legal field, and you have to be yourself, and that's how you're going to succeed as yourself. But the parallel universe that you're talking about is interesting because I have mixed feelings about. I think it's so important to have women speaking and having these conversations together. I also think it's really important to have men involved in the conversations. Right. And I was doing a talk at Book Passage in the City. Book Passage in the City, not too long ago. And there was it was a mixed group, so there were lots of guys. And this guy in the back, who's a friend of mine, he said, "Well, I have a daughter in college. What can we do as men to help the situation?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry." He said, "What are you guys doing to fix the situation?" And I said, what are you doing to fix the situation? And I said, are you hiring women? Are you mentoring women? Are you promoting women at your company? That's what you need to do. And we do have to have men participate because unfortunately men still hold most positions of power and leadership in corporate America as well as in the government. So we can't exclude them. But that being said, having these kind of safe spaces where we can throw out ideas and brainstorm and share and talk about how we can make our move, make our mark is really important too. And get advice in a space where you feel like you can throw anything out and no one's going to judge you or put you down or demote you or whatever.
What other questions? Yes.
So I actually work in private wealth, but I was investing in this growth equity fund, and one of the portfolio companies, it's a female it's a female CEO, a female founded company, and so what she's actually done is, I guess I didn't even realize the statistics, but only 1% of software engineers in Silicon Valley are female, and so what she did was she created it's sort of like an online dating platform for tech companies to hire software engineers, and so 20% of her participants are actually female, and when tech employers are hiring, they don't see a resume, they don't see a name, they don't see anything. The only thing they see is they actually have you code, so they don't so they see the work product.
Oh, nice.
And women actually surpass the number of women being hired surpass the men. So I just thought it was really interesting, and I will definitely read the book now that I know. But
yeah.
But have you do you cover a lot of kind of software engineers at all?
We do. Well, we have a whole chapter on women on college campuses who are majoring in computer science, and actually the numbers have gone down in the past 30 years. So in 1985, 37% of computer science grads were women, and today that number is 18. But I did read something really, really hopeful recently. I saw that the number of girls taking the AP computer science exam from 2016 to 2017 doubled. And the number of people of color taking the AP computer science exam in that year period tripled. So we're seeing hopeful signs. But it's true. I mean, there are very few. I'm not sure. I think it was a little bit more than 1%, but there are very few women software engineers in Silicon Valley. Tracy Chow is in our book, and she's a fabulous woman. And her story is she was a lead engineer at Pinterest. And talking about the gender bias and discrimination, she said one of the hardest things for her was she led a team of men who reported to her, and she said that they would go out after work and they'd have beers after work, and they wouldn't invite her. And she said it was really awkward because they'd all leave and let's go out for a beer, and she was kind of ignored. So she took the lead, and she said she talked to Pinterest, the powers that be, and said, why don't we have Pinterest sponsored happy hours where everyone's invited, just to include the women. But that's the kind of subtle bias that we were discussing. That did they even know that they were ignoring her? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But she was being left out, and a lot of shop talk was happening over beers that she was missing out on. So it's really tackling some of that unconscious bias, those little, as I call it, death by 1,000 cuts that we need to work on to make more women feel comfortable in those spaces, to hire more women, and then to create workplaces that are welcoming towards women. So, I mean, if you were a woman engineer in Silicon Valley, would you really want to go work for Uber? No, I mean, maybe now that Travis Kalanick is gone and they're like, getting rid of all the people who are, not supporting women and minorities, but you have to look also at the company and what their gender makeup is, who's in leadership, do you share their values, do you want to work for this person, do you believe in what they believe in? Those are important questions to ask.
We'll go Monica, and then we'll go over to Jean.
So you just mentioned something that I want you to talk more about. So number one, this topic is extremely important to me. I've been in the tech industry for the last 12 years. And I have two things. One, I'm curious about the title of the book. As a word person and a mother of a almost 5-year-old girl and a 6-year-old boy, the word girl, when we're talking about women, it really bothers me. And there's a lot in that, like personally and culturally. Women using the term to refer to other women as girls, and it's all over the place. So that's one thing that I'm just curious about how you settled on that title. And then the other one is, so now I'm nervous because I just said that thing that was
no, that's fine. No. I think it's a great question. Yep.
You were, what were you just talking about? You were just talking about something that was really important.
Well, we were talking about the very small percentage of women engineers in Silicon Valley.
Yes.
Yeah.
And about Uber, you were mentioning.
And Uber and the workplace and working for a company where you believe in their values. Yeah.
I'm curious if you've seen in the book or in talking about the book and maybe even other people in the room talking about how women entrepreneurs are bringing different kinds of, and I don't know if this is true or not, but different kinds of business models and different kinds of business compared. So when I think of Uber, I think of aggressive, let's dominate the world, let's cutthroat, whatever it takes.
Right.
And personally, I like Lyft and, about let's sit next to the driver and let's pick up some other people along the way. And it's also a male founder, but a totally different approach. And I'm wondering how much you're seeing women following sort of conventionally masculine business modes and how much you're seeing different varieties as women take more roles in tech.
Yeah.
So those two things about the girl and then the way of being in business.
Right.
Yeah. So the girl question is really interesting because we've had this question before. It's not new, and we decided on the term girl for the reason that, first of all, it is about girls rising. So the book does cover, young girls and how to raise girls to become bold and strong, and confident. And it also suggests it's a more colloquial form of, we talked a lot about the boys club and the boys, and we really wanted to show how sisterhood and girls, this new girls club is coming to be. So the girls club was a big theme for us as we wrote the book. So I understand, because I worked, my very first job out of college was with a rape crisis center, and I understand we are women, hear us roar. But I also think that there's something a little more not in a pejorative way, but it's more of hey, sister. It's more colloquial. It's more friends would call each other sisters, girlfriend versus little girl. So that's why we use the term girl, and also the sense that they're rising up. The young girls are rising up to become these more powerful women.
I appreciate you saying that about the title, because one of the things that bothers me is that I'll hear my husband and other men referring to women in the office, like co-workers, as girls.
As girls, yeah.
And I've talked to him, my husband specifically, about that, and he tries to catch himself. He says, I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
My new company that's a startup where everybody is born in 92. And which is like mind-blowing. But my 6-year-old boy will say the same thing. He comes into the Hivery and says, there are all pictures of girls on the wall. I'm like, they're not girls, they're women.
Yeah.
And it is different when it's women talking about
Yes.
ourselves. It
Yes.
is totally different, and yet men hear women using the words girls, and I refer to coworkers as girls and catch myself and try to correct myself.
Yeah. It's context, right? And who's saying it. So yeah, if my husband called my, office mates girls, I'd probably be upset. But amongst the women, we're girlfriends, we're sisters, so that was sort of the sense.
I love the sisterhood.
Yeah. The second part of your question about women leading companies and do they lead differently, I think so. I mean, you can read the book and see, but one of my favorite stories is Julia Hartz, who's the CEO and co-founder of Eventbrite, which is an online ticketing. You guys have probably used it before to buy tickets to events. You guys use it here? It was Eventbrite for tonight's tickets? No?
We don't.
Okay.
We don't,
All right.
but I do love them.
Anyway, so she started...
And I really admire her. I just want to say that.
She's like one of my heroes. She
Yeah.
started the company when she was pregnant with her first child, and so she knew from the very beginning that she was going to have this juggle with as being a founder, starting a company, and raising a baby. So she went into this knowing that what she was going through was going to affect her company, and she was going to have other women at the company going through the same thing. So she started this company with this. Her tagline is something like, at Eventbrite, we value the whole human being, not just the employee self. And they really do, and she really walks her talk. I mean, they have a take the time you need policy. So whether you're having a baby, or you're caring for an elderly adult or a parent, or whether you're having your own issues, health issues, it's take the time you need, no questions asked. Come back when you can come back. She advances women, like 40% of the women are in leadership. And there are studies that show that women CEOs hire more women, and the leadership trickles down. So there are more women at women-led companies. Women venture capitalists invest in more women founders. So, it's a trickle-down philosophy, but I do see that these women are much more aware of what's going on in their company. They're much more focused on workplace, environment, cultural issues, gender diversity. The companies that we look at, the entrepreneurs that we look at in the book are more consumer tech based, and financial tech, consumer tech. But even the B2B companies that we don't mention in the book, but like Sarah Leary at Nextdoor and Clara Shih at Hearsay, they're big SaaS B2B companies. Culture and workplace environment is very number one in their minds. It's a priority.
Jane, you had a question too, right?
So I started out, my dad's a physics professor. I grew up in Ames, Iowa. I got a venture-backed company that I was the founder and CTO of in early 90s, with deals with Dow Jones for the Wall Street Journal, Apple, and Sun. Fast forward a couple more years, the whole company blew up. Deals beyond my control, not my fault, but it blew up. So my question pertains to what I did next. I had offers from Microsoft and from Apple, and I turned them down. At that time, Microsoft people were referred to as microserfs. I had 2 young children. Apple was, Steve Jobs had not done his return. I thought they were in the tank. And so I moved back to Marin. I was in Silicon Valley, moved back to Marin and started a SaaS company that, I kept it small. I made some money. I took my kids to school. I picked them up at 3. I mommy tracked. And so that's the question. I went from the 80-hour-a-week work week to being the mommy. And yes, I ran my company and did all this, but My company was little. We didn't go public. We didn't get acquired. And so how do we reconcile these trade-offs that we have to make as women? Because I would never give up the time I had with my kids. That's amazing. And now they're off and successful and doing their thing. But to make it in tech, the sacrifice that you're told that you have to make is those 80-hour weeks and 100% devotion. So how do we reconcile this?
That's my first book, Torn, about the work-life juggle. Would you have a chapter on work-life culture and the juggle in this book? And I mean, it's a great question. Not all companies are really progressive, forward-thinking about maternity leave, about paternity leave. There has, over the past few years, been what is like an arms race amongst the tech giants to offer better maternity and paternity leaves to mothers and fathers. Still, it's 3 to 4 months, which is look at other countries, and not always paid. So I'm sure you all know the fact that the United States is the only country in the developed world that doesn't offer paid family leave, which is very hard to swallow. But it's hard. I mean, what I say about career when I talk about like work-life juggle and work-life balance, which there is no balance, but I like to refer to Sheryl Sandberg's Career Jungle Gym, where she talks about, back in the day, it was like this steady ascent, this career ladder. You would start at the very bottom and you climb up the ladder, and each rung of the ladder was more power, more prestige, more money. And then finally you hit the C-suite. You were like the CEO, the CTO, that you made it, right? And if you didn't hit that, then you fell off the ladder and you were done. So it was like make it or break it, up or out. Today, as Sheryl Sandberg talks about so eloquently in her book, is this Career Jungle Gym where it's possible to continue as you have, maybe not going up to the top level, CTO level of Microsoft, but to go horizontal for a while. You don't always have to be ascending. You can go horizontal for a while. You can take a downshift in your career if you want. Then you can go back horizontal. Then you can just go back up when the kids are a little bit older. But sticking with it, staying with something, keeping your feet wet, so to speak, is really important. I mean, we all have to make decisions and trade-offs. I'm the same way. I have had a very topsy-turvy career. I wouldn't have missed any of the time I spent at home with my children, being a stay-at-home mom, which I did for a number of years, and then I decided I was ready to do something else. And but again, it's finding the right culture and finding the right fit for you. And people ask about success and how do success strategies. I'm like, well, what is success to you? Would that be success if you had let your kids be in daycare and you had taken that CTO position at Microsoft? If that's what success is to you, then you probably would have done that. But success to each person is very different, and I think you have to honor that and not try to follow someone else's definition or path towards success.
And I do feel like, going back to Monica's point, that the way, and especially I'll just use what I see here, the way that women are creating businesses here is creating a model that actually provides that, those options, the flexibility, the choices, the decisions. I feel like that's becoming more a part of our current times, where you can actually exercise those decisions in a way that feels still inspiring and liberating. I feel like we have a long way to go in order to create, to truly create equal opportunities where women can truly choose these different paths and choices and not feel like they're giving up something. But what I'm seeing in the way that, especially what I see here, the way that women are building businesses is with that different path in mind. So again, back to that different model. There's some other comments. I see people like,
I have a question, but if there's
Sure.
comments on this. I don't know if this is on. Hi, I'm Laura Bearden, and my question is about mentorship amongst women. I know that there's built-in systems for men. It's just easier for them to ask for those relationships, and I coach women, and I know that our self-esteem gets in our way. And I'm wondering if there's examples in your book or that you've come across about how to find mentors and how to really put yourself out there.
Yeah. That's a great question. So I was on a panel last week with a woman who's Barbara Byrne, who's the vice chairman at Barclays, and I was scared to death. You know, she's like total hitter, and I was sitting next to her. We were talking before the panel. We were talking about mentorship and sponsorship, and I had said, you know, I think it's really important for women to, you know, find mentors, and mentorship to me is a two-way street. So you don't just go up and say, Grace, will you be my mentor?
Right.
You know, you develop a relationship, as I was saying, and then, I'll say, I'll help you with your social media. You know, what can I do for you? And then you'll say, great, and you'll help me with something. You can do a talk, you know, whatever it is. There's like kind of a give and take, and that to me is a really great sort of, mentoring relationship. But Barbara said to me before, she said, "Oh, mentoring is bullshit." She said that it's all about sponsorship and finding somebody at the company and a sponsor as opposed to a mentor is somebody who in power at your company typically who will advocate for you.
Right.
So when it comes time
Right.
for promotion, for a raise, they will stand up for you and say, you know, Grace is incredible, badass, she's done this and that, and she deserves this promotion, and give it to her. And that's a sponsor. So we had this little back and forth about sponsorship versus mentorship. But it's also, you know, even with sponsors, you don't just go up to someone and say, you know, oh, Mr. Vice President, Senior Vice President, will you be my sponsor, whether it's a woman or a man. It's about helping that person, you know, building that relationship of trust and, you know, mutual respect, and that's all part of finding that person and building that. It's not asking for someone to be your mentor, it's building a relationship with that person.
And
You see more people doing networking or this kind of give and take than doing traditional mentorship where someone, I mean, I see a lot of men who are given mentors or sponsors.
Yeah.
And I don't see that for women. They're more, they're lost, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what we have seen is like really vibrant women's groups at tech companies. So I was, you know, at Facebook, part of their women engineering group, kind of sitting in, watching their whole thing, and they have incredible speakers who come in and talk about, you know, imposter syndrome and confidence building, and those women really get to know each other. Same thing at Uber. I was at Uber before all this stuff broke 2 years ago with their women engineering group, and they all take care of each other. They really do. I mean, but they were talking amongst themselves, like, how do we improve our image to the outside world? Because, you know, this is Travis Kalanick he called Uber Boober, like in the early days, talking about his, you know, prowess with the women and how he could get any woman he wanted to. So Uber's had a, you know, kind of a negative reputation for diversity and gender diversity for a long time because of some of the comments he's made. And these women were asking, you know, how can we improve our image? And actually I was there with Tracy Chow, who's a diversity advocate, and she said, you know, is it just PR? You guys are just worried about your public image, or is it really a problem that's systemic? And they opened up and they said it's really a problem that's at our, you know, it's kind of built into our company. We need to work on it. But those kinds of groups are groups where you can share. I mean, that's more of a mentoring sort of thing, but where you can share, you can open up, you can ask advice.
I think the challenge is in terms of mentorship, and I'd love to hear what you guys think, but I know when I was in that environment and looking around for mentors, I mean, one particular challenge was that there just weren't that many women in the room. So it made your pool of mentors smaller, and often I was drawn to the one woman that was a woman who was in the room with me and senior to me, and that doesn't automatically make her a good mentor. So just because she's senior and there doesn't mean that she's the right match. And so and what I learned then and what I am learning more and more now in working with women here is that the best mentor is the one that knows that she will learn from being your mentor as much as she will teach. So as soon as you feel that magic of someone that wants to be a mentor because it lights something up inside them, that's your person. And unfortunately, in many of these corporate environments, our pool of female mentors is simply small.
And one of my greatest mentors is my first boss from the Silicon Valley days, and she's now VP of marketing at Google. And I still call her when I'm having like a crisis of confidence or I'm having an issue with a coworker, and I call her and she's like, she just gives me great advice, and I can call. I know she's there. I can call her whenever I need to. And I don't work with her anymore, but she's just a friend from way back.
That's what I think. That's what has been the most fascinating lesson of everything I could share from the Hivery. It's that any woman that I have asked yet to mentor another woman has always said yes. Because I think that we have this like intuitive desire, similar to what we were talking about earlier, in our intuitive desire to help each other. I think that we have that among women. So often if you are drawn to a woman as a mentor and feeling that need for someone who has gone before you, so often the answer is resounding yes. But I think we also need to gauge that with, like, is that person enlivened by the idea of teaching? Or are they just simply the other woman in the room? Janet, you had something on that too? Or?
My question was not on mentoring, but I do have something to say on it, which is that we often do have a dearth of women mentors, and sometimes the appropriate person to mentor us is a man, but oftentimes there are distinctions and differences in the way the issues that a woman might have in the workplace, or how she needs to be supported in that mentoring or sponsorship relationship. And even sometimes the sponsorship is just natural when it's a man, and male bosses it doesn't occur to them to sponsor women in the same way. So I wrote an article with a coworker of mine, actually at the request of a lot of male executives that we had been coaching, who were suddenly like, oh, I guess I've got an issue here and I have no idea what to do with it. So we wrote an article called How to Be a Good Guy. And you can get it at howtobeagoodguy.com. You can download it at that URL. We bought it just because we got so many requests for the article. It's just made it easier. Yeah. But it has a whole section on mentoring and sponsoring, if you're a man, mentoring and sponsoring a woman, and the distinctions about how to do that well.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But my question is actually more about access, because something that I'm really fascinated with, and I do, for those of you who don't know me, I do a lot of work on gender equity, particularly in the Valley and in entertainment, is that we live in this very siloed world where men very oftentimes have access to information and access to mindsets that women don't have. For example, I spoke at South by Southwest a few years back, and I spoke at a high school class in Palo Alto, and at Susan Marczynski's mother teaches there, and she asked me to come in and speak to her high school journalism class. And the boys knew what South by Southwest was, and the girls didn't. And I thought that was fascinating, that there in the center of Silicon Valley, you already have this bifurcation of what the girls know and what the boys know. And I see that play out as we move up through different industries and through different professions, that women know different information, and they have different mindsets about what's possible for them, and they get different information about how to develop themselves and how to develop their careers than men do. So I don't know what you have to say about this, but I'm sure it's something that kind of came up as a theme in the book of how do you break through that kind of invisible bubble to become part of the club. And I will say that from my personal experience, about 7 years ago, I was asked to be an advisor at a VC firm. And it was just mind-blowing to me, because every corner I would go around, I would think, oh, this was right here all the time, and I didn't know about it. Yeah.
Well, that makes me think, your question's great. It makes me think about Reshma Sojani, who's the founder of Girls Who Code. And she's got a great quote that's, I'm going to butcher it, but it's like, we raise as parents, and I have 2 little girls and I have 2 teenage boys. So, as parents, just how are we raising our kids, right? How are we treating our boys versus our girls? And she says, in our country, we raise our boys to be bold and risk-taking, and we raise our girls to be polite and perfect. And that just sticks with me, because it's so true, and I have to watch myself as a parent to, and I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, don't comment on Coco's hair. Don't comment do you comment on Matthew's hair and how nice his hair looks? No, don't comment on her hair. And I think it's not exactly answering your question, but it goes back, I think, to the heart of like where this all starts.
But it's
And
more insidious than we realize.
it is, and
Yeah.
it starts in our households and the way we're raising our girls, not just as parents, but how they're treated in school, and, boys will raise their hand and then they'll get picked, chosen, oh, I forgot what I said. And they have no qualms about that. The girl's like, okay, do I have the exact answer perfectly thought out in my mind so that I can say it and not, embarrass myself? And then maybe they'll raise their hand, right?
I just came back from speaking at the Pennsylvania Women's Conference, or Conference for Women, and Michelle Obama was the speaker after me, which was really intimidating. One of the things that she said is we teach our boys to compete and we teach our girls to cheer them on.
Yeah.
And she also said we have to get over the confidence thing and start talking about courage.
Interesting.
And then she said, I'm tired of hearing about imposter syndrome after having sat through sat at so many tables full of imposters.
Wow.
Oh, interesting.
I like it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So everyone, I want to make sure that you'll get some time with Sam. She's going to be back here. She brought her book. She's going to be doing a book signing, and she will have a moment for those of you that want to have like a one-on-one connection with her. She'll be here for a little bit, and I want to make sure we have time for that. Before we wrap, though, is there anything else that you wanted to add before?
No, I'm just so grateful to be here, and I love this. This is like my heart is with everybody because I just love seeing women supporting each other, asking questions, and this is like such a beautiful place. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. I'm so grateful that you're willing to have this open conversation. This is exactly how we love to do things here. I always tell people we don't just want to stand here and talk at you. We really want to have a conversation, and I feel like each of you step up to that task each time. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Samantha, for being our wonderful guest tonight. And I do want to encourage you to check out her book. I so enjoyed it. The stories in here, again, they resonate. I feel like I learned so much from the challenges and the good times. So thank you so much, Sam.
You're so welcome.
Bravo.
Thank you
Yes.
for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.